Big thanks go out to Tywa for supporting today's video via Patreon. Urza Cheap Artificer versus Xavier Sal, Shelob and Vorel. 2-lander into a Signet, hopefully Solemn as well with a Skull Clamp on it. Not an incredible hand, but not so bad that we have to ship it back, so we will keep. And we're the first to play here, drawing to a Dark Steel Citadel, so get the tap land in. Going to have a couple of indestructible lands. And the Sultai player throws out a Mystic Remora on turn 1, which we're going to have to play into. And draw into a Cyclonic Rift, so throw out the planes into the Signet. And there's no point getting out the Skull Clamp until we're ready to equip it to something, so we will leave it there. And then another spell cast into the Remora. It's Ozolith the Shattered Spire this time. And 3 for 3 on that Mystic Remora, a 3 visit, so our opponent's going to be at 9 cards in hand. And deciding to keep hold of the Mystic Remora, paying 1 into that during the upkeep. And going through to the cleanup step with 8 cards in hand, so discarding a Llanowar Wastes. Alright, a Baleful Strix for us, which we could cast with the Arcane Signet, could guarantee a land for next turn, or get closer to a land for next turn. Or we could just guarantee a land here with Solemn Simulacrum. So I think we're best going for the Solemn here, whilst no one's going too quickly. Protria's Seal, drawing more cards for the Mystic Remora. This will untap a legendary creature. Obviously, the Vorel has a tap ability. Swiftfoot Boots from Shelob into the Remora as well, allowing the Mystic Remora to go now that he's got 17 cards down into his library. Casting Kami of Whispered Hopes, and obviously played a land this turn, so we'll have to discard again at the end of the turn. Discarding another land to hand size. Alright, and there is a Smothering Tithe for us. I was considering going for our commander here, but maybe Smothering Tithe will be okay. It's a shame that we can't play and equip the Skull Clamp. It's a shame that we're only getting Smothering Tithe down as soon as the Mystic Remora disappears as well, but should get some treasures out of the Smothering Tithe. 2 counters onto an Everflowing Chalice, obviously looking to proliferate in this deck. Counter going on the Mage Ring Network as well, so remove any number of storage counters from this to add colourless for each counter removed this way. Alright, well, Shelob clearly doesn't have a lot to do this turn, deciding to pay into the Smothering Tithe. 6 cards in hand. Retreat to Kazandu now. That is either plus counters or gain 2 life on landfall. Makes sense to put plus counters on this because it's X mana of any one colour, where X is its power. And they do play a land into the enchantment straight away, so we'll imagine there's a plus counter going on there. So yeah, 1 counter put on here means it's 2 put on there instead, thanks to its ability. So now 4 mana in total available. But just deciding to pass the turn, nothing to do with that 4 mana. Unless he wants to interfere on one of our turns. A Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge. Want a bit more mana before we start going for that, so maybe go for the Sharding Sphinx here. And we can start making some Thopter tokens. And noteworthy that the Xavier is holding up priority here, so like I said, could have some interference. And allowing it in, we will take the Solemn Simulacrum in at the Simic player. And that means that we had an artifact creature hit, so Sharding Sphinx going to make a Thopter for us, hopefully start making a good amount of Thopters next turn. And this will make it easier for us to get out our commander, which does have affinity for artifact creatures. And that's a pet card of mine, Fathom Mage, so looking to dump a bunch of plus counters on there to draw cards. And they can put a plus counter on there with the Ozolith, actually put a couple on there. And they do go for that ability straight away, so the Ozolith puts 2 plus counters on this, drawing 2 cards, meaning that we can get some more treasure tokens with the Smothering Tithe. Skyshroud Claim for some more ramp into the Big Spider commander. Okay, then it is a Beast Within that went on to the Sharding Sphinx, so not wanting to see a bunch of Thopters. Wouldn't have worried about that personally, I would have kept hold of the Beast Within. 1 board wipe will have a Sharding Sphinx sorted out. In fact, I would have gone for Smothering Tithe over the Sharding Sphinx. Alright, another land being made, so another couple of plus counters on the Kami, meaning this will tap for 5 mana now. Which means that can get down an Aklazots. Haven't seen the Black Bat God, I think it's the worst in the cycle by quite a ways. Got down a 1000-Year Elixir as well, able to untap the Kami. I think even the Kami's more of a threat than the Sharding Sphinx was. So tapping that down for 5 black mana again. Oh, and this time it is Tevesh Sat, Doom of Fools. Favourite of mine. So deciding to tick up and make a couple of throw tokens with the Planeswalker. Alright, there's a Research Thief. No lands, unfortunately. Whenever an artifact creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So why don't we go for Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge. That will make this a lot cheaper, and we can get that down and maybe draw some and start trying to make lands. Alright, so tempting to tick up so that we can better keep hold of this, but we could go for the Sharding Sphinx and make more Thopters here. So I think ticking down is the thing to do here. The static ability on the Tezzeret makes this really worth playing. So it is merely 2 blue mana for the Sharding Sphinx. And then, even though we're using treasures, this should still not cost too much. Yeah, just a blue mana for that. So let's get the Research Thief into play. That does have flash, but I don't think it matters if we played at flash speed on our own turn. We're looking to draw cards right now. And then that only counts for artifact creatures, so we'll take in a Thopter over here and the Solemn down the middle. Only reason I'm not swinging in over here and completely concentrating on this player is because of the Flying Bat God. Alright, and there is a rapid hybridization, so again, the Sharding Sphinx is going to go down, so not going to have more Thopters in the way unfortunately, but we will at least draw some more cards with the Research Thief still. Our opponent's really worried about the Sharding Sphinx, so that would have been an argument to go for the Research Thief. Maybe encourage our opponents to use the removal on something like that before the Research Thief. Don't think the threat assessment's too good this game so far. So on hitting, draw a couple of cards, hoping for a land here. Talisman could be worth trading out the treasures for. That's annoying, still not getting into anything. So I will just go for the Talisman instead of keeping hold of the treasure tokens. And I was hoping that we'd have Thopters held up for the Bat God, but might be that we end up losing the Tezzeret unfortunately. See what happens. Suppose we could have held on to Rift if we wanted to, or played out the Baleful Strix instead. Might have been a better idea. I obviously don't want to go for Cyclonic Rift unless we are overloading it, or doubling Season from our opponent. So I might be forced to go for the Rift for only 2 mana. And then Voriel coming into play for the first time. That will evolve the Fathom Mage, so going to get multiple plus counters on that thing. So that jumps up to a 7/7. 6 plus counters on it now, and obviously drawing more cards means Smothering Tithe makes more mana. So it's not beyond the realms for us to overload a Cyclonic Rift now. And the 7/7 turns in sideways towards Tevesh Sat, but obviously just throwing a 0/1 Thrall in the way. Not going to be too difficult to protect that Planeswalker, which makes it more and more tempting for this Rift. And Shelob into play now, so starting to see all the commanders hit play. I expect to see one during this player's turn as well. And Shelob does have Ward 2, but decided to give it Hexproof all out, so Swiftfoot Boots going on there. Do you think she needs 4 pairs of Swiftfoot Boots? Alright, awesome, and then it is a Bite Down, dealing damage equal to its power to a Planeswalker that is on the Tevesh Sat, so not bouncing that back to our opponent's hand. Alright, looks like Smothering Tide's been paid into again, so that will hold us off the Cyclonic Rift, which is relevant. I think the Voriel player might have paid into one as well, I'm not sure. 1000-Year Elixir, continuing to tap and untap the Kami. Muldrotha into play, will be able to grab back the Tevesh Sat straight away if he wants to. Could also grab the Mystic Remora, which is really good with our Smothering Tithe. Playing a tap land out of the bin first, plus counter goes on the Muldrotha. Or 2 plus counters thanks to the Kami. Then we see the Mystic Remora again. So yeah, just keeping the 3 cards in his hand and completely rebuilding his board with the Muldrotha. 2 more Thrall tokens, not drawing a card with the Tevesh Sat. Now if the bat comes in towards our Planeswalker, do we throw away the Research Thief is the question. They are going in at Tevesh Sat. If I want to set up with Cyclonic Rift, it means we could keep this in play for quite a while. But would we rather just be drawing cards the whole time with Research Thief? Especially when we're being made to discard here. Yeah, let's get rid of the Baleful Strix. Could have discarded the Thran Dynamo, I suppose, and then sacrificed the Research Thief to the block, and then cast this, and that would have brought our artifacts back, including more mana with a Thran Dynamo. Maybe that would have been an idea, but I suppose we can still throw away the Research Thief if we want to. But maybe look into Cyclonic Rift next turn. So yeah, let's give up on the Research Thief with the idea that we're going to reanimate it at some point. Alright, another artifact in the form of a land. Obviously, these lands are quite fragile, but they do put the artifact count up. So go for that. Go for our commander should be fine, I think. I don't think it necessarily matters what order we do this in. And that only costs 3 mana thanks to our affinity to artifacts. And gives our artifact creatures menace, makes a big artifact creature at the end of the turn. Throw out Thran Dynamo. That's been played into the Mystic Remora, so going to draw our opponent more cards. But we've got Smothering Tithe now, so that will add a mana for us. So that means that we'll have enough treasures for the Cyclonic Rift after we cast this Skull Clamp. So drawing with the Mystic Remora upon casting that, like I said. And I'll just throw the Skull Clamp onto the Solemn Simulacrum. Argument to be made for us going for the Thopter there maybe. Draw a couple of cards, then put it on the Solemn. But I'd rather just have a blocker in the air, to be honest, because I'm not sure how this Rift's going to go. Maybe should do the Rift now, so that there's less chance of interaction. It's plus on the Tezzeret. And we're at 40 life at the moment, and jump up to 56. Our opponents go below 30. You know what? So that we don't have to deal with doubling season shenanigans and all that, let's just go for the Rift now. We'll force our opponents to rebuild during the next turn cycle. At least it's a sorcery speed Cyclonic Rift. Would have been nice to be able to get our artifacts out of the bin with the Brilliant Restoration this turn, but I think we've done a reasonable amount, can't exactly complain. Alright, that has that player Scoop, does not want to replay all the stuff, so 7 mana, have a player Scoop. 6 cards in the Sultai player's hand before everything gets bounced. We've obviously only got 1 card in hand. Next turn I'm praying that we can keep this board intact and get this back out next turn. Obviously that goes well with all the Thopter tokens if we can keep the Sharding Sphinx in play, which we have struggled to do this game. Turn everything in sideways towards this player and hope that we can still block. Alright, so knocking him down to 18, we get the Construct token from the Urza. And that is currently a 12-12 with Menace. Shelob straight back into play, can have the Swiftfoot Boots played and equipped onto it. Our opponent might have another Bite spell. Yep, that is a Fight spell actually, so fighting the Urza. Yeah, put it back in the command zone. Should be able to get that out easily enough. Commanders do still count as dying, even though they go straight back into the command zone as opposed to the graveyard. So our opponent still gets a copy of Urza, and therefore a copy of a Construct as well, which means our Menace isn't as good anymore. Although we won't necessarily have Menace next turn. I'm imagining that we'll play out our commander again though. Getting out the Retreat to Kazandu again, forcing our opponents to replay out their stuff, which is what we said we were going to do. So just getting out the Kami of the Whispered Hopes again. And there's the Mystic Remora. Alright, and the exact card that we don't want to see played against ourselves, an Austere command. Yeah, just going straight in for the Brilliant Restoration here. We'll get some artifact creatures into play, making our commander only cost 3 again, I think. Alright, so Brilliant Restoration. Again, not going to pay into the Mystic Remora. Our opponent's got plenty of cards in hand. Discarded, by the way, a Vivian, Avenger of Zendikar, and the Tevesh Sat. And because he draws once again, we are cantripping with regards to a treasure token on all of our non-creature spells. So those come down. A Baleful Strix will draw us a card when it enters. And there we see a Foundry Inspector, making our artifacts cost 1 less. So go for our commander again, which does indeed only cost Esper mana. So giving our artifact creatures Menace once again. And we'll go 16-16 in at the left along with a Thopter token. And then the 3-1 with Menace can go into the right. And I'm hoping that we'll draw 3 cards there. Let's go a couple of Beast tokens in at the right as well. We've got the Tezzeret to tick up on as well. Haven't worked out the maths on that. It depends on how our opponent blocks, I suppose. Could force them to make certain blocks if we ticked up on Tezzeret first. Alright, double blocking on the Construct in order to not take a bunch of life. We're going to make another one of those at the end of the turn, so forcing them to lose the Shelob. Definitely don't want to see too much Urza shenanigans from the Shelob player. That will make a Construct every turn, of course. Every one of our opponent's turns. Alright, so landing some damage with our artifact creatures. The Sharding Sphinx back out of the bin once again. And is going to start making Thopter chump blockers. The more that we are allowed to hit with the Thopters, the better the Research Thief becomes. There's a Bident of Thassa for more card draw. Painful Truths as well, obviously more card draw again. Say yes to the Sharding Sphinx to make Thopters. Alright, so let's just tick up on the Tezzeret now. We have to use a treasure token in order to get the Foundry Inspector out, so doesn't add any affinity. Just +2 on the Tezzeret. I think this Planeswalker was worth keeping after all. Yep, so down to -8. This opponent goes down to 3. So I think we're safe to just go for a Painful Truths now. We'll put some cards in our hand while we've got the opportunity. Make sure to put all 3 colours into it. Alright, and into more lands. Let's go for Scrubland to fix our colours a little bit better. Might as well Skull Clamp on this Thopter token that is tapped. Again, just trying to keep our hand full in case our opponent wipes the board here, but only has 2 cards in hand, so should be looking pretty good at this point. Just end the turn with a Skull Clamp onto our Urza commander. And of course making another big artifact creature with Menace again at the end of the turn. So that is a 15/15. A Spitting Spider, so looks as though this is Spider Tribal. Can sacrifice a land to deal 1 damage to each creature with flying, so it would be interesting to give this Death Touch. And deciding to do that gets rid of the Baleful Strix and all the Thopter tokens. Getting a lot of hate towards the Sharding Sphinx this game, which is interesting. Managing to deal with that creature very nicely. And then the Construct being sacrificed, they did have a food copy of that, even though it was a token. So managing to gain 3 life. Won't be enough for our opponent, unfortunately. We'll make another Construct at the end of the turn, this time coming out as a creature. Alright, and there is a Liberator, making it so that we can play artifact spells at flash speed. Drop the Ancient Tomb, and we'll just tick up on the Tezzeret. Not going to waste my opponent's time. He's very kindly played it out for us, even though he knows he's done here. So yeah, like I said, thank you to my 2 opponents for playing that out. I think the Cyclonic Rift causing a concession made that easy for us, and then Smothering Tithe not going down to the Beast Within was the real clincher, I think, because the downside of Esper is that you tend to struggle on mana, but if you're allowed a Smothering Tithe into things like Rhystic Study and Mystic Remoras, then you're going to have mana for the rest of the game most likely, and panned out quite well for us that. So hopefully you all enjoyed this revisit to Urza, Chief Artificer, one of my favourite commanders from 2023. Huge thank you to the patrons for their support of the channel as well. I'm tribalkai. Thank you for watching.